When I was 14 years old and studying in Saigon, my father was suddenly transferred to another province for work, with a 2-year assignment. Because of that, my parents decided not to sell our house in Saigon. Instead, they just looked for a temporary rental house in that small town. Back then, there were still some rental homes available in big cities, though not many. But in smaller towns, rental homes were almost non-existent, could be counted on one hand. And on top of that, my parents already had 7 children. So trying to rent a whole large house was basically impossible. Yet somehow, with help from the local police, they managed to find one. The police introduced my parents to a beautiful French-style villa that looked elegant and luxurious. The house had a very spacious front yard. Even with a large old jackfruit tree standing in the middle, there was still enough room to park for cars. On both sides of the house were wide pathways, about 3 meters each, leading to the backyard. The backyard was our favorite place. It was full of fruit trees. There were rows of ripe papayas around the fence, a line of sugarcane forming a kind of boundary, and in the middle was a garden of saursop trees. Every single fruit was more than a handspan in diameter. According to my mother, the landlady rented the entire house and garden to our family, but she asked to keep one single divan placed in a corner of the living room so she could stay over 3 or 4 nights a week. She needed to look after another garden about a kilometer away. There was also a family altar in the living room, covered with a curtain. She told my mom not to worry about it. So basically, in the huge living room, only the divan and the corner where the altar stood were reserved for Auntie and Chiam, the landlady. When we moved in, my mother and all of us were delighted with the spacious house, everyone except my oldest sister, who frowned and said, "This house feels so cold." My mom replied, "There are 4 doors front, back, and on both sides, and the garden behind is wide, so wind blows in from all directions." Of course it feels cool. I like the house too, so I chimed in, "I think it feels nice and cool, not cold." My sister knocked me lightly on the head and laughed. "Cool, my goosebumps are standing up. It's not cool, it's cold. You think it's just cool because your head is full of cool air." I grinned and wrinkled my nose teasingly, then ran off with my younger siblings to help bring in boxes of books from the living room. The house had a central main door. Upon entering, on the right was Auntie Nam's divan, next to a window looking out to the front yard. Directly across from the divan, against the wall separating the inner room, was the large family altar covered with a curtain. On the left side of the living room was a set of sofas and a glass display cabinet. Behind the living room was my parents' bedroom. Opposite theirs was my little sister's room, right behind the wall with the altar. Next, toward the middle of the house were 2 more rooms on either side. They were empty, as my second oldest sister lived in Saigon with her own family and only came to help during the move. Then came the enormous rear section of the house. From the front of this section, there was a large door on the right side looking out onto the garden of the neighboring house. Right next to that door was a wide divan bed, which I claimed as my sleeping spot. I didn't want to sleep in the front room because this area had 3 doors that led straight into the garden from the left, right, and back. Naturally, my 2 younger brothers wanted to sleep with me too, so we could mess around together more easily. Far to the left was the kitchen area, about 10 meters from our divan. In the center of the rear section were 2 tables. One was a 6-chair dining table. The other was a smaller table where my mom placed bottled water and a kerosene lamp for power outages, which were common in small towns. The first few days after moving in, we always ran straight to the backyard after school to pick and eat fruit. One afternoon, while I was scanning for ripe saursop, I suddenly saw a girl about my age standing in the yard of the neighboring house. There was no fence between our gardens, none of that neighbor next door, separated by a green vine stuff. The girl smiled brightly and said, "Looking for ripe saursop? Found any yet? If not, come over here. We've got a bunch." I hesitated, not sure how to respond, when she continued, "Don't be shy. I know who you are, your tone, right, just transferred here from Saigon. We're in the same class. You probably didn't recognize me because you're new." "My name's Tuyen." I smiled and replied, "Really, so we're classmates, and you're okay with me picking fruit from your yard? Of course, come over. I've got some really nice ripe ones." I was thrilled but still a little hesitant. I glanced back toward the house, looking for my mom. She had warned us when we moved in. Since there was no fence and both yards had lots of fruit trees, we absolutely weren't allowed to enter the neighbor's garden even if we didn't pick anything because we might be accused of stealing. Seeing that I hadn't moved, Tuyen teased, "Come on already, what are you shy about, embarrassed?" That hit my pride, so I quickly said, "I'm coming, I'm just, ah." As I ducked under some branches to cross over, she asked, "What's wrong? I have frozen feet." "Huh, why?" "Because every time a pretty girl talks to me, my legs freeze up." Hearing that, she blushed and said, "Geez, typical Saigon boys. Always so full of it." Still, she handed me a big saursop. I smiled and said, "Whoa, this is huge and perfectly ripe too." "Thanks." While peeling the fruit, I looked around her garden. Under the shade of a large saursop tree was a long bench, a small table, and a book. Seeing me glance around, Tuyen said, "I like coming out here to read and do homework. Right now I'm rereading The Adventures of a Cricket by T. Hoey to prepare for our class essay. I forgot we have an assignment on that. I already read all of T. Hoey's books last year, so I totally spaced." Surprised, Tuyen asked, "You already read it, but we're only covering it this year." I replied, "My sisters and I usually read next year's books in advance, so when we get to class, it's easier." Suddenly, Tuyen looked at me strangely and asked quietly, "You just moved into that house. Have you seen any ghosts?" I nearly burst out laughing at the childish question. "Ghosts? Come on, no way." But before I could say more, I heard my mom calling me back, so I just smiled and ran off. The first 3 nights, we slept soundly. But on the 4th night, while I was fast asleep, both my younger brothers woke me up. "Tone, we're thirsty." I crawled out of bed and headed toward the water table. While pouring water into 2 cups, I glanced at the clock. It was exactly 2 a.m. After handing them the water, I went to put the cup back. Then, at the far end of the kitchen in the dark, I saw the figure of someone wearing a white obaba. Facing away from me, the tiny kerosene lamp on the table wasn't bright enough to reach that far, so I squinted and realized it was Auntie Enchium. She was tall and slender, very recognizable. So I asked, "Auntie Enchium, why are you up so early?" "It's only 2 in the morning," even though we'd only been there a few days. Every morning at 6 a.m. when the alarm rang, we'd see Auntie Enchium already in the kitchen, cooking food to take to the fields. But that night, she just turned her head to glance at me without answering, then slowly walked into the dark hallway toward the main house and disappeared. I figured, she probably woke up hungry and came down for a midnight snack, mouthful, so didn't answer. Makes sense. I didn't think much of it and went back to bed, sleeping until morning. At 6 a.m., as usual, we all woke up. While we brushed our teeth, Mom prepared our breakfast, just toasted bread and hot milk. While we ate, I saw Auntie Enchium in the kitchen again, wearing the same white obaba, back turned toward us. Casually, I asked, "Auntie Enchium, why were you up so early last night?" She turned to me, calm as ever. "What are you talking about? I slept straight through till morning." "Were you dreaming?" Feeling a bit embarrassed, I replied. "No way. I was up at 2 a.m. giving the boys water, and I saw you in that exact same outfit standing in the kitchen. I even called out to you and you didn't answer." This time, she stared at me with a strange, unreadable expression. Then chuckled softly and said, "Oh, maybe I was still groggy and didn't hear you. Anyway, I have to get to the fields now and cut some greens for the market." As soon as she left, my mom sat beside me and asked, "Tone, you really saw Auntie Enchium in the kitchen last night?" "Are you sure?" "Yeah." I even asked her why she was up so early and she just walked away. Mom asked, "Why were you up that late?" Chi Siang and Long were thirsty, so I got them water. The clock said 2 a.m. "Mom." She paused, then quietly stood up, went to get an empty Guigo's milk tin, the Dutch milk powder can she used for my baby sister, and said, "This lid seals tightly. Even when full of water, it won't spill if you lay it down. Tonight, I'll fill this with filtered water and put it beside your bed. That way, if your brothers get thirsty again, you won't have to walk all the way to the water table." That night, before bed, she gave me the full Guigo's cans of water and said, "Keep them right by your pillow. If they wake up thirsty, just reach up and grab it." But that night again when I was fast asleep, one of the boys shook me awake. "Anatone, we're thirsty." Half asleep, I got up, slipped on my sandals, and headed toward the water table like the night before. As I neared the table, I suddenly remembered Mom's words and turned back, but not before glancing at the clock. Again to AM instinctively, I looked toward the kitchen and there she was. That same white figure, standing by the kitchen, back turned to me. I grinned. This time, I'd call louder, no way she'd deny it. Auntie NCM, I see you sneaking food in the kitchen. Can you hear me, just like the night before? She turned her face slightly, didn't say a word, then slowly walked into the darkness toward the main house and vanished.